My husband asked me to dress sexier, but it revealed a much bigger problem in our marriage.
Hi Reddit, my name is Lena, I'm 33 years old. My husband Daniel is also 33. We've been together for 15 years. That means we started dating when we were 18. We were just kids finishing high school, trying to figure out what life would look like. Back then everything felt simple. We had big dreams, no responsibilities, and a lot of time for each other. Daniel was always calm and thoughtful. He was the kind of person who listened more than he spoke. The kind of person who remembered the small details about people. I was different. I've always been quiet, not shy exactly, but I never liked attention. Even in college, while my friends wore tight dresses and went to loud parties, I preferred sweaters, long skirts, and comfortable clothes. Loose fits, high necklines, warm layers, clothes that made me feel relaxed instead of watched. Some people would probably call that style modest. Others would call it frumpy. I never cared what word people used, because Daniel never had a problem with it. For 15 years he never once complained about how I dressed. Not once. We built a life together. After college we both found stable jobs. We bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, just a place with a little yard and a wooden porch where we sometimes drink coffee on Sunday mornings. 2 years ago we had our daughter, Maya. She is energetic, curious, and full of personality. She is also a toddler, which means life in our house is a constant cycle of toys on the floor, spilled juice, bedtime battles, and very little sleep. Being parents is amazing, but it is also exhausting. When you are juggling work, daycare, cooking, laundry, and a toddler who wakes up at 5 a.m. for no reason, romance sometimes takes a back seat. Our relationship didn't collapse or anything like that, but our sex life definitely slowed down. Not dramatically, just enough that we both noticed. Daniel has always had a slightly lower sex drive than I do anyway. So we simply accepted it as part of being adults with responsibilities. Everything was stable, everything felt normal, until one shopping trip changed the tone of our entire marriage. It started when my younger sisters came to visit for the weekend. They are 25 and 27. They are confident, outgoing, and extremely stylish. The kind of people who look good in anything they wear. Short skirts, crop tops, bright lipstick, trendy jackets, the whole thing. One Saturday we decided to go shopping together. Daniel came along with us because he wanted to spend time with Maya while we browsed stores. At first the day was completely normal. My sisters tried on outfits. We joked around in dressing rooms. But then something unexpected happened. Daniel started pointing at clothes. Not for my sisters, for me. He held up a dress with a lower neckline and said casually, "You should try something like this." I laughed. I assumed he was joking. I told him that wasn't really my style. But 10 minutes later he pointed at another outfit. A cute summer top. "Seriously," he said, "I think that would look great on you." Again, I declined, but the comments kept coming. He pointed at shorts, at tank tops, at a few outfits that honestly looked great on the mannequins, but not like anything I had ever worn. By the time we left the store I thought he was just being playful. That night, after Maya fell asleep, we were sitting on the couch. I was wrapped in a thick blanket like I usually am because our house is always cold. Daniel looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised me. "I wish you showed more skin sometimes." I laughed again. I thought he was teasing. But he didn't laugh. He explained that he meant it. He said he would really enjoy seeing me in clothes that showed a little more. Maybe a bit of cleavage. Maybe shorts around the house. Nothing extreme. Just something that felt more casually sexy. I stared at him for a moment because the request came out of nowhere. For 15 years he had never asked for anything like that. I told him that kind of clothing didn't really match my lifestyle. I'm cold most of the year, and I spend a lot of time bending down to pick up toys or chasing Maya around the living room. Revealing clothes didn't exactly seem practical, but Daniel kept bringing it up over the next few days. Not aggressively, just casually. Every time he mentioned it, I felt a little more uncomfortable. There is something important I should explain. I have never liked my body very much. Even before pregnancy. After having Maya things changed even more. Stretch marks, loose skin, a softer stomach. I am grateful for what my body did. It created my daughter, but that doesn't mean I feel comfortable showing it off. That is one of the reasons I wear loose clothes. They make me feel protected. So when Daniel kept asking me to wear things that showed more skin, it felt like he was asking me to step far outside my comfort zone. Eventually I decided to humor him. One Saturday morning I told him we could go shopping together. I said he could pick out anything he wanted me to try on. Daniel looked surprised but excited. At the store he picked out exactly what you might expect. Lace camisoles, low neckline tops, short lounge shorts, one pair of vintage-style bloomers that honestly looked ridiculous to me. I tried everything on. Each time I stepped out of the dressing room Daniel looked thrilled. He smiled like he had discovered a secret treasure. But instead of feeling confident, I felt awkward. So I started demonstrating something. I bent down like I was picking up toys. The shirt slipped down. I stretched my arms like I was grabbing something from a shelf. The shorts shifted. I twisted like I was changing a diaper. The clothing moved everywhere. I explained how impractical it would be to adjust outfits like that all day while taking care of a toddler. After a while Daniel's excitement faded. Eventually he sighed and said, "Okay, I understand." He apologized for pushing the idea. He said he wouldn't ask again. I thought that was the end of the issue. But something strange happened after that day. At first I didn't notice. Life stayed busy. Work, daycare, groceries, bedtime routines. But after a few weeks I realized something. Daniel had stopped initiating intimacy. Completely. So one evening I asked him about it. He hesitated before answering. Then he admitted something that hurt to hear. After seeing me try on those outfits, something changed in his mind. He realized that he missed seeing me as playful and attractive in that way. But now he struggled to connect that feeling with the way I usually present myself. He said he still loved me deeply. But the sexual attraction felt different now. Almost muted, like a switch had flipped. I didn't know what to say. Because the situation felt strange. He asked for those clothes. I tried them. Then somehow the experience made things worse instead of better. Now we're in a strange place. I still prefer my comfortable clothing. He is trying to reconnect with attraction that suddenly feels complicated. Neither of us wants to hurt the other. And neither of us knows exactly how to fix it. After many late-night conversations we realized something important. The clothes were never really the issue. The real issue was how we saw ourselves. Daniel missed the playful energy we had when we were younger. Back when life was lighter and flirting happened naturally. And I realized that I had spent so many years hiding my body that I forgot how to feel attractive at all. Not for him. Not even for myself. So we started trying small changes. Not dramatic ones. Just small steps. We started planning occasional date nights again. Even if it's just takeout after Maya goes to sleep. Sometimes I wear something slightly nicer than my usual house clothes. Still modest. Still comfortable. But a little more intentional. Daniel has also started putting effort into his own appearance. Better clothes. Regular haircuts. Even some exercise. Because attraction goes both ways. Right now our marriage isn't broken. But it did hit a strange turning point. And the truth is we're still figuring things out. Maybe communication and patience will fix it. Maybe counseling will help. Maybe attraction simply changes after 15 years and learning to adapt is part of the journey. All I know is this. Clothes were never really the problem. The real challenge was learning to see each other again. Not just as parents. Not just as roommates. But as partners. And that takes time. Maybe even more time than it took to build our life together in the first place. Hi Reddit. I didn't expect so many people to respond to my story. Reading the comments was overwhelming. Some people said my husband was being shallow. Some said I was being stubborn. Others said the real problem was our communication. Honestly, a lot of the comments made me think. Because the truth is, after my husband admitted he wasn't feeling the same attraction anymore, things in our house started to feel different. Not hostile, not angry, just quiet. The kind of quiet that slowly fills a room when two people are thinking about things they don't know how to say out loud. Daniel still helped with everything around the house. He cooked dinner some nights. He played with Maya. He cleaned up toys before bedtime. From the outside, our life looked exactly the same. But something had shifted. One night about 2 weeks after our last conversation, we were sitting on opposite ends of the couch. Maya was already asleep. The television was on, but neither of us was really watching it. Finally, I muted the TV and asked him something. Are you still attracted to me? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He ran his hand through his hair and stared at the floor. That silence felt longer than any argument we'd ever had. Finally he spoke. Yes, but it's different now. That answer made my stomach drop. I asked him what he meant. He tried to explain carefully. He said when we were younger, attraction felt easy. Spontaneous. We flirted. We touched each other randomly. We laughed a lot. Now most of our physical contact was practical. Passing Maya to each other. Handing over toys. Falling asleep from exhaustion. He said seeing me try on those clothes reminded him of something. Not the clothes themselves, but the idea that we had stopped seeing each other as romantic partners. We had become teammates in parenting. Partners in responsibility. But somewhere along the way, the playful side disappeared. Hearing that was painful, but I also realized something. He wasn't blaming me. He was describing something that had slowly happened to both of us. The next few days I thought about that conversation constantly. At work, while cooking dinner, even while folding laundry, I started noticing things. How often I wore the same oversized sweater. How quickly we rushed through daily routines. How rarely we actually looked at each other without distraction. One night I decided to try something different. Nothing dramatic, just different. After Maya went to sleep, I changed into a softer sweater that actually fit my shape a little better. Still comfortable, still warm, but not something that looked like I had borrowed it from a camping trip. Then I made 2 cups of tea and sat next to Daniel on the couch. At first he didn't notice anything. We talked about work, about Maya's daycare, normal things, but eventually he looked at me more closely. He smiled slightly. It wasn't a huge moment, but it felt like a small crack in the wall that had grown between us. Over the next few weeks we kept trying small changes. Nothing that felt forced. Sometimes we went for short walks together after dinner. Sometimes we stayed up late talking instead of immediately going to bed. Once we even hired a babysitter and went out for dinner like we used to. It wasn't a fancy restaurant. Just a small place with warm lighting and good pasta. But something about sitting across from each other without toys on the table felt strange and nice at the same time. During dinner Daniel said something that surprised me. He said he realized he had handled the clothing conversation badly. He admitted that asking me to change something so personal so suddenly wasn't fair. But he also admitted something else. He had been feeling disconnected for a long time and didn't know how to talk about it. The clothing request had been his awkward attempt to fix that feeling. Hearing that helped me understand him better. Because I had also been avoiding certain conversations. It's easier to focus on daily routines than to admit when emotional distance is growing. A few days later something unexpected happened. I was folding laundry in the bedroom when Daniel walked in. He leaned against the doorframe and watched me for a moment. Then he said something simple. "You look beautiful today." At first I thought he was joking. Because I was wearing sweatpants and a plain shirt. But he looked completely serious. That compliment felt different from the earlier conversation about clothes. It didn't feel like a request for change. It felt like appreciation. Later that night we sat together on the couch again. The same couch where so many quiet conversations had happened recently. But this time the mood felt lighter. Daniel took my hand. That small gesture felt strangely meaningful. Not because holding hands is a big deal, but because it reminded me of how often we used to do that without thinking. Eventually he said something honest. He said attraction doesn't disappear overnight. It fades slowly when two people stop feeding it. But it can also return slowly when both people start paying attention again. We are still figuring things out. Our sex life hasn't magically returned to what it was 15 years ago. And maybe it never will. But something important has started happening. We're looking at each other again. Not just as parents, not just as people managing responsibilities, but as partners who still care about each other deeply. And maybe that's the real beginning of fixing things. Because the truth is, long relationships don't fail because of one conversation. They struggle when two people stop noticing each other. Right now, Daniel and I are learning how to notice each other again. One small moment at a time. A few weeks passed after everything I wrote in my last update. Things were calmer, not perfect, but calmer. Daniel and I were talking more, spending more time together in the evenings, trying to reconnect in small ways. At first it felt like progress. But sometimes progress also brings up things you didn't realize were buried. One night after we put Maya to bed, Daniel asked if we could talk. The way he said it made my stomach tighten. Not because he sounded angry, but because he sounded serious. We sat at the kitchen table. No phones, no television, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator in the background. Daniel took a deep breath. Then he said something I wasn't expecting. I think we both got too comfortable. I asked him what he meant. He explained that when we were younger, we put effort into the relationship without even thinking about it. We planned dates, we flirted, we surprised each other with small things. But over the years, life slowly replaced those moments with routines. Work schedules, bills, parenting responsibilities. He said we became very good partners in life. But we stopped being romantic partners. And once he realized that, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Hearing that made me feel defensive at first. Because my immediate thought was, well, of course things change when you have a child. But then I stopped myself. Because he wasn't blaming me. He was describing both of us. And deep down, I knew he wasn't wrong. After Maya was born, most of my attention went into being a mother. That role became my entire identity. Comfortable clothes, hair tied back, always moving from one task to another. Somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking about myself as someone who could still be attractive. Not just physically, but emotionally, playfully, confidently. Daniel continued speaking. He told me something that surprised me. He said when he asked me to wear more revealing clothes, he wasn't really thinking about skin or fashion. He was thinking about excitement. He missed seeing me playful, confident, a little bold. The clothes were just the symbol he used for that feeling. That explanation hit me harder than I expected. Because I realized something uncomfortable. I had spent so many years rejecting the idea of being sexy that I accidentally rejected the idea of being desirable at all. Not just to him, but even to myself. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. The house was quiet. Maya was still asleep. Daniel was making coffee in the kitchen. I walked in and sat down at the table. We talked for a few minutes about normal things. But then I asked him something honestly. Do you think we can get that feeling back? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He poured coffee into 2 mugs and sat down across from me. Then he said something simple. I think we can, if we both want it. That conversation stayed in my mind all day. At work, in the car, even while picking up Maya from daycare. That evening I tried something small. Not revealing clothes, not a dramatic makeover, just effort. I brushed my hair instead of tying it up immediately. I wore a soft dress I hadn't touched in years. It wasn't tight, it wasn't revealing, but it made me feel a little more like myself from years ago. When Daniel came home from work, he paused for a moment when he saw me. Not in shock, just noticing. He smiled. That smile meant more to me than I expected. Later that night something interesting happened. We were sitting on the couch again, like we often do after Maya goes to sleep. Daniel reached over and brushed a strand of hair away from my face. That gesture felt strangely intimate. Because it wasn't rushed, it wasn't distracted, it was intentional. We started talking about our early years together. College memories, road trips, late-night pizza runs, moments we hadn't thought about in years. At one point Daniel laughed and said something that made me blush. You used to be really bold with me. I laughed because I had forgotten that version of myself. But he was right. When we were younger, I flirted more. I teased him. I even surprised him sometimes. Over time that side of me slowly disappeared under responsibilities. Being reminded of that version of myself felt strange. Like meeting an old friend you haven't seen in years. Later that night we went to bed. For the first time in a long while, the room didn't feel distant or awkward. We didn't rush anything, we just held each other. And honestly, that moment felt more important than anything else. Because physical intimacy starts long before anything else happens. It starts with comfort, with trust, with feeling seen. The next few days continued in a similar way. Small changes, more eye contact, more small touches, more laughter. It wasn't dramatic, but it felt real. Then one evening something happened that surprised me. Daniel was helping Maya build a tower with wooden blocks in the living room. She was giggling every time the tower fell over. I was standing in the kitchen doorway watching them. At that moment Daniel looked up and caught me staring. He smiled and said something that stayed with me. You know, you don't have to hide all the time. He didn't say it critically. He said it gently, like someone offering permission instead of demanding change. And for the first time in years, I started wondering if maybe I had been hiding not just from the world, but from myself too. Right now our relationship is still evolving. We are learning new habits, learning to communicate better, learning to balance being parents and partners. Some days are easier than others. But one thing has become very clear. The clothing conversation that started everything was never about fabric or skin. It was about connection, about remembering that underneath the routines of life, two people still need to see each other as more than just responsibilities. They need to see each other as people worth noticing, worth desiring, worth choosing again and again. And maybe that's what Daniel and I are doing now. Not trying to go back to who we were at 18, but learning how to choose each other again at 33. One honest conversation at a time. A few weeks have passed since the last time I updated. A lot has happened since then. Some good things, some uncomfortable realizations, and one conversation that honestly shook both Daniel and me more than anything before it. At first, things between us were improving. The small changes we started making were actually helping. We were talking more, laughing more, even flirting a little again, which felt strange after so many years of routine. Sometimes it was something small. A quick hug in the kitchen. A joke whispered while Maya was playing in the living room. Those moments felt tiny, but they mattered. For the first time in a long while, I felt like Daniel was seeing me again. Not just as Maya's mom. Not just as the person who organizes our life. But as his partner. And I started noticing him again too. The way he smiles when Maya says something silly. The way he always makes sure everyone else eats before he does. Those little things reminded me why I fell in love with him in the first place. But one night, something unexpected happened. It started with a simple comment from one of my coworkers. We were sitting in the break room during lunch. A few people were talking about relationships and marriage. One of the women asked me how long Daniel and I had been together. When I said 15 years, she looked impressed. Then she asked something casually. Do you two still feel attracted to each other after that long? The question caught me off guard. I hesitated, not because the answer was no, but because I realized it wasn't as simple as yes anymore either. That question stayed in my mind all afternoon. When I got home that evening, Daniel was already there. He was sitting on the floor building a puzzle with Maya. She was giggling every time a piece didn't fit. Watching them together always makes me feel warm inside. Daniel looked up and smiled when he saw me. That smile still has the same effect it did when we were 18. Later that night, after Maya was asleep, I told him about the question my coworker asked. Daniel listened quietly. Then he said something honest. I think attraction changes. It doesn't disappear, but it changes. I asked him what he meant. He thought about it for a moment before answering. When we were younger, attraction was mostly physical, he said. Now it's everything. He explained that seeing me as a mother, a partner, and someone who supports our family had deepened his love for me. But sometimes that deeper love also made things complicated. Because it was easy to shift into family mode all the time. Parenting, working, managing responsibilities. And when two people stay in that mode constantly, the romantic side slowly fades into the background. Hearing him say that made something click in my mind. For years, I had been focused on being responsible, practical, reliable. I rarely allowed myself to be playful anymore. I had convinced myself that part of life was behind me. But maybe it didn't have to be. A few days later something unexpected happened. Daniel and I were cleaning the house after Maya had gone to bed. Music was playing softly in the background. An old playlist we used to listen to during road trips. One song came on that we hadn't heard in years. Daniel suddenly grabbed my hand. Dance with me, he said. I laughed. I told him we were in the middle of cleaning. But he pulled me into the living room anyway. For a minute we just stood there, swaying slowly. It felt silly, but also strangely romantic. Halfway through the song Daniel stopped dancing. He looked at me in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Then he said something unexpected. I missed this version of you. I asked him what he meant. He smiled slightly, the one who laughs easily. That comment stayed with me. Because I realized something. I had been so focused on hiding my body and protecting my comfort that I forgot something important. Confidence isn't just about clothes. It's about energy, about allowing yourself to be seen. That realization led to a conversation we probably should have had years ago. The next night, Daniel and I sat down after Maya was asleep. No distractions, no television, just an honest conversation. Daniel admitted something difficult. He said when he first asked me to wear more revealing clothes, he thought changing something external might bring excitement back into our relationship. But now he realized the real issue wasn't appearance. It was connection. He said he didn't want a different version of me. He just wanted to feel like we were still choosing each other as partners. Not just existing side by side. Hearing that made me emotional. Because I realized I wanted the same thing. The truth is, long relationships don't fall apart suddenly. They slowly drift when both people stop paying attention to the small moments that keep love alive. Right now Daniel and I are trying to rebuild those moments. Sometimes it feels awkward, sometimes it feels natural, but every time we try, we learn something new about each other. And about ourselves. One thing is certain now. The conversation about clothing was only the beginning. It opened a door to deeper conversations we had been avoiding for years. And those conversations are still unfolding. Because after 15 years together, Daniel and I are realizing something surprising. You don't just fall in love once. Sometimes you have to learn how to fall in love with the same person again. And that process can be both terrifying and beautiful at the same time. I didn't think I would need to write another update so soon. But something happened a few nights ago that made Daniel and me realize just how fragile progress can be. For a while, things between us had been getting better. Not perfect, but warmer. We were laughing more, talking more. Sometimes we even found ourselves flirting again in small, awkward ways. It felt like we were slowly rebuilding something we had lost. Then last Friday happened. It started as a completely normal evening. Daniel came home from work a little later than usual. Maya was already running around the living room with her toys. I was making dinner in the kitchen. Nothing unusual. When Daniel walked in, he kissed Maya on the head and then came into the kitchen. He wrapped his arms around me from behind. That small gesture made me smile. For a moment everything felt peaceful. After dinner we cleaned up together. Then we put Maya to bed. By the time she finally fell asleep, both of us were exhausted. But instead of going straight to the couch like we usually do, Daniel asked if I wanted to sit outside for a few minutes. It was one of the first warm evenings of the year, so we went out onto the porch. The neighborhood was quiet, streetlights glowing softly, a few distant sounds of cars passing by. Daniel leaned back in his chair and looked up at the sky. For a while neither of us said anything. Then he asked me something unexpected. Are you happy? The question caught me off guard. Not because I wasn't happy, but because the question felt deeper than it sounded. I thought about it before answering. I think so, I said slowly. Then I asked him the same question. Are you happy? Daniel didn't answer right away. He rubbed his hands together like he was trying to organize his thoughts. Finally he said something that made my heart sink a little. I'm happy with our life, he said. But sometimes I wonder if we stopped dreaming. That sentence hung in the air between us. I asked him what he meant. He explained that when we were younger, we talked constantly about the future. Traveling, experiences, goals. Now most of our conversations were about schedules, groceries, daycare, responsibilities. He said he loved our family and our home. But sometimes he worried that we had accidentally turned our relationship into a routine instead of an adventure. At first I felt defensive again. Because parenting a toddler is not exactly the stage of life where people are backpacking through Europe. But the more I thought about it, the more I understood what he meant. We had become very good at maintaining our life. But we had stopped imagining anything beyond it. Then Daniel said something even more honest. He admitted that when he first started feeling disconnected months ago, he didn't know how to explain it. That's why the clothing conversation happened. It was the only way he could think of to bring excitement back into the relationship. But now he understood that excitement doesn't come from clothes. It comes from shared experiences. From feeling like life together is still evolving. Not just repeating the same routine every day. That conversation lasted almost 2 hours. By the time we went back inside, the house was completely silent. We sat on the couch together for a while. No television, no phones, just thinking. Finally I said something that had been sitting in my mind all night. What if we start doing things differently? Daniel looked at me. I told him maybe we had been approaching the problem the wrong way. Instead of trying to recreate the past, maybe we needed to build something new. New habits, new experiences, new ways of connecting. He smiled slowly, and for the first time in weeks, that smile looked hopeful instead of uncertain. The next morning we did something spontaneous, something we almost never do anymore. We packed a small bag, called a babysitter, and drove 2 hours to a nearby lake. Just the two of us. We walked along the water, talked about random things, shared food from a small cafe. Nothing dramatic happened, but something felt different, lighter. For the first time in a long while, we weren't talking about problems or responsibilities. We were just enjoying each other's company. At one point Daniel reached for my hand. Not out of habit, but intentionally. That moment made me realize something important. Love doesn't disappear in long relationships. But it does require attention, effort, curiosity. Daniel and I are still learning how to give those things to each other again. Some days we succeed, some days we fall back into old routines. But one thing has changed completely. We're no longer ignoring the problem. We're facing it together, and honestly, that might be the most important step we've taken so far. Because after 15 years together, Daniel and I finally understand something we never thought about when we were young. Love isn't something you find once and keep forever. It's something you keep building. Day by day, choice by choice, and right now, we're choosing each other again. It has been a few months since my last update. I didn't write sooner because Daniel and I needed time to actually live through everything we had been talking about. Not just discuss it, not just analyze it, but experience real changes in our daily life. And honestly, those changes were harder than either of us expected. When people talk about working on a relationship, it sounds simple. Just communicate more, spend time together, reconnect, but real life doesn't move that neatly. Some days we made progress. Other days we slipped right back into old habits. Work would get busy, Maya would get sick, laundry would pile up, and suddenly we were back in the routine that had slowly pushed our relationship into the background. But something was different this time. Before, when we felt distant, we ignored it. Now we noticed it, and that awareness changed everything. One evening about a month after our lake trip, Daniel and I had another long conversation. Maya had just fallen asleep. We were sitting on the couch like we often do at the end of the day. But instead of turning on the television, Daniel turned toward me and said something simple. "I think we're doing better." I asked him if he really believed that. He nodded, not because everything was perfect, but because we were trying. And trying together mattered more than anything else. Then he said something that surprised me. He admitted that when this whole situation started, he was afraid our relationship might already be too stuck to change. He thought maybe the version of us that had passion and excitement was gone forever. But over the past few months, he had started noticing small moments again. Moments that reminded him of who we used to be, like the way I laughed at one of his terrible jokes during dinner. Or the way we both stayed up too late one night talking about random memories from college. Those little moments brought something back, not exactly the same feeling we had when we were 18, but something deeper, something more stable. That conversation made me realize something important too. For years, I had believed that attraction was mostly about appearance. About bodies and clothes and confidence. But now I understood something different. Attraction in long relationships is often about attention. About feeling seen. About feeling appreciated. A few weeks later something happened that really confirmed that realization. Daniel and I were getting ready for bed. Nothing special, just our normal nighttime routine. I was brushing my hair in the mirror when he walked into the room. He stopped for a second and just looked at me. Then he said something that made me laugh. "You know, you look beautiful even in pajamas." I joked that he must be getting old if pajamas were exciting. But he shook his head. He said it wasn't about the clothes. It was about the way I carried myself lately. More relaxed, more open, less like I was trying to hide from the world. That comment stayed with me, because he was right about something. Over the past few months I had slowly stopped hiding so much. Not by wearing revealing outfits, but by allowing myself to be present, to laugh, to flirt, to show emotion without immediately covering it with practicality. And interestingly, Daniel had changed too. He started planning small surprises. Nothing expensive or dramatic, just thoughtful gestures. Bringing home my favorite snacks. Leaving little notes on the kitchen counter. Once he even recreated a simple date we had in college. Takeout pizza and a movie on the floor of the living room. It sounds silly, but those moments reminded us why we chose each other in the first place. Our relationship still isn't perfect. Some nights we're still too tired for romance. Some days we're both stressed and distracted, but something fundamental has shifted. We are no longer treating our marriage like something that simply exists. We are treating it like something that needs care, attention, curiosity, and sometimes even effort. Looking back now, it's almost funny how this entire journey started. With a conversation about clothes. At the time it felt like such a big issue. But now I understand it was just a symptom. The real problem was that we had slowly stopped investing in our connection. And once we started fixing that, everything else began to change too. So here's where we are today. Daniel and I are still together. Still learning, still growing, still occasionally awkward when we try to flirt like teenagers again. But also stronger than we were before. Because we faced something difficult instead of pretending it didn't exist. And that experience taught us something we wish we had understood years ago. Long relationships don't survive because two people fall in love once. They survive because two people keep choosing each other. Over and over again, even after 15 years, even after routines and responsibilities try to get in the way. Right now, Daniel and I are still choosing each other. And honestly, that feels like the best possible ending to this story. At least for now.